This video will contain spoilers about Undertale. The game costs $10 and should run on basically any computer. If by any chance you have not yet played the game, I recommend taking the time to play through it before watching this video. After this point, I will be heavily spoiling Undertale. Undertale is one of the most amazing games that I've ever played. While closer to the time of release, the hype surrounding the game may have soured some people's opinions of it, I still think that it's genuinely amazing. The story of the game is well written, and the dialogue and jokes work very well, at least for the most part. Along with this, it has some of the best music in any game that I can think of. The gameplay is also pretty good, using a hybrid bullet health system for avoiding attacks, and regular turn-based RPG mechanics for everything else in the fights. For the purpose of this review, I will play through the neutral and pacifist routes, but I intend to talk about the Genocide ending as well, but not nearly as much as I talk about the other two routes. But let's get into the story of the game. The game begins with a short introduction. This introduction establishes that there are two races that lived on Earth, the monsters and the humans. One day, for a reason that is revealed later in the game, war broke out between both races, and this war ended with the humans being victorious. They then banished the monsters into the underground, where they sealed the entrance with the Barrier. It then switches to the modern day, where it talks about Mount Ebott and the legend surrounding it that says all who climb the mountain never return. It then shows a child on the mountain, and they look into a deep chasm before tripping and falling in. The child lays alone at the bottom of the hole with no way back up. Then it goes to the title screen. Upon starting the game, it asks you to give a name to the fallen child. The developer intended for you to use your own name, so that's what I did. After getting the name entered, you immediately gain control of the child at the bottom of the hole. You find a door to the right, and on the other side you find an animated yellow flower. The flower then introduces himself as Flowey the Flower. He says that you must be new to the underground, and saying that you must be confused before offering to show you how things work in the underground. He then introduces you to the mechanics of how the game works. He points out that the red heart on the screen is your soul, and says that it starts out weak, but can grow stronger if you gain more LV, or love. This is a half-truth, but I'll go over that later. Flowey then offers to share some love with you through what he calls white friendliness pellets, which, if you allow them to touch you, deal 19 of your 20 health. He then tries to execute you with a circle of pellets that encroaches slowly on you. If you decide to avoid the friendliness pellets, the music will slow down after each attempt to hit you. Flowey then insults you, telling you to run into the bullets, although the text switches back to friendliness pellets before again trying to execute you, telling you that down here it's kill or be killed. At the last second before he's about to kill you, a small flame appears on the screen, hitting Flowey and sending him flying off the screen. Then, a humanoid goat appears on screen and introduces herself as Toriel. She admonishes Flowey's actions and attempts to comfort you, saying not to worry. She then explains that she'll visit the site daily to see if anyone has fallen down, so that she can look after them. Toriel begins to guide you through the ruins. Although there are puzzles in the ruins, she solves most of them for you, or makes the answer so obvious that you couldn't miss it. She then informs you that there are other ways to deal with situations, and then makes you fight a dummy. She tells you to simply talk to the dummy, and in the fight, once you do, the combat will end, and she congratulates you for taking care of the situation in a non-violent manner. In the next room, you encounter a frogget, and once you talk to it, Toriel enters the fight and gives it a stern look, making it go away. Further ahead in the room, you see a bridge going across the water, but it's covered in spikes. Toriel simply grabs your hand and gingerly leads you through the path to the other side, circumventing the challenge. After this is another puzzle for you, but the only thing to this puzzle is to walk to the right side of the room. Once you make it to the other side of the room, Toriel steps out from behind a pillar and tells you that the purpose of the puzzle was to test your independence. She then goes on to ask you to wait while she attends to some business, citing the danger of the ruins as to why you should wait there for her to take care of her chores. Once she has left, you can start making your way through the ruins, encountering some monsters along the way, although they're mostly harmless, with some being able to be spared with no effort on the player's part. Some people might find these annoying and kill one or several of the creatures out of frustration, but I think that is something that is intentional, although some players might kill things simply because it's habit to kill things that you encounter in games. After a bit, the player will encounter Napsabluk, who is just laying on the floor, but is blocking the path to proceed through the ruins, so you have to try and move him by force. During the fight, he attacks you with his literal tears, and you can try and cheer him up. Doing so will succeed after a few attempts, and as a joke, he makes a hat out of his tears and asks if you like it. Saying yes gets 2 final tears before he fades away. After this, you find a small shop, which is just 2 spiderwebs, and you can leave money in, and in return you get some pastries. I bought a donut here to skip a fight later on in the game. At several points before and after this, Toriel will call the player on their cell phone asking about their preference between butterscotch and cinnamon, and if they're okay with the other one that they didn't choose. She's about to call you again as you arrive at the entrance to her house, but before she can, she notices you and heals you before apologizing, saying that it was irresponsible of her to leave you alone for so long, as she takes you into the house. Inside, you can sleep in a bed that she has prepared for you, and upon waking up, you find a slice of pie waiting for you. Once you go and speak to her again, she offers to talk to you about some of her books. She'll happily share some of the books with you, but you can't progress the game until you ask her about a way out of the ruins. After insisting a few times, she asks you to wait there while she goes to take care of something. When you follow her, she explains that ahead of you both lies the exit to the ruins, and she intends to destroy it so that no one can ever leave again. Although this isn't done for malicious intent, she goes on to explain that every human who ends up in the underground meets the same fate. They come, they leave, and then they die. So to protect you, she is going to keep you from leaving the underground. After you have followed her to the door, she realizes that she will need to stop you by force, reasoning that either she will destroy the exit and keep you safe, or you will prove that you are strong enough to survive by beating her. The fight starts and Toriel will attack you. It appears that the only way through this is to attack her and kill her, but if you happen to be left at 2 health or less, she will stop trying to hit you. If you keep trying to spare her, eventually she loses the will to try and attack you, instead asking that you return to your room. But if you persist, she gives in, putting aside her expectations, loneliness, and fear, and letting you pass. She says that she will let you leave, but asks that you not come back, and once you step through the door, you find Flowey waiting on the other side. Here, Flowey will react to everything that you've done in the game so far, even in previous save files. In my playthrough, he mocked me, saying that it must be so clever to figure out how to spare her. He repeats his philosophy that in this world is kill or be killed, and says that one day you will likely meet a relentless killer, and that you will die over and over again. He asks what you'll do then. Will you kill out of frustration, or will you just quit and allow him to take back control of the world? After this, he laughs at you before disappearing into the ground. Once you pass through the door to the underground, you find yourself in a snow-covered forest on a narrow path. If you check a nearby bush, you can find that a camera is watching you. As you make your way down the path, strange things begin to happen behind you, such as an unbroken stick snapping while being hidden behind some trees, and a shadowy figure moving behind some trees in the foreground as well. Once you reach a bridge, the shadowy figure approaches you and begins to talk to you, saying, "Don't you know how to greet a new pal?" before suggesting you turn around and shake his hand, and when you do, this is what happens. This is Sans the skeleton. He then goes on to explain that he's supposed to be watching for a human, but he doesn't really care about capturing anybody, but his brother Papyrus really wants to capture a human. At this point, he notices his brother in the distance and says that you should go through the bars blocking the bridge, since they're placed too far apart to stop anyone. You then hide behind a conveniently shaped lamp as the two talk. Their conversation is used to establish their characters, with Sans as the jokester and his main thing being that he says a lot of puns. Skelepuns. Meanwhile, Papyrus gets mad at his brother for being lazy and telling amazing puns. Eventually, Papyrus leaves so that he can go tend to his puzzles. Before you can leave, Sans asks you if you can do him a favor and meet his brother, since he's been in a slump lately and meeting a human might help that. Further up ahead, you find both brothers, and upon noticing you, Papyrus turns to Sans to confirm that you are human, with him saying that indeed you are a human. Papyrus then turns to you, declaring his intent to stop and capture you, before both brothers leave and head to their first puzzle that they have set up. Before you can catch up with them, you have an encounter with Doggo. Doggo introduces you to the idea of blue attacks, which check to see if you're moving when they hit you. If you're standing still, they won't do anything, but if you're moving, they deal damage to you. Remember this for later since it's going to be important for Papyrus' boss battle. You pacify Doggo by simply petting him once, although you can get some funny dialogue by continuously petting him even after he is willing to spare you. And apparently all the guards in this area are dogs, so pacifying them is as simple as petting them. The best example of this is Lesser Dog, who, he goes a little overboard on how excited he is to be pet. A little further up ahead, you encounter Papyrus and Sans at the first puzzle. This one involves you trying to walk across an invisible path, and if you step off, you get shocked. But this puzzle proves to be rather easy because you need to be holding a special orb to be shocked, and Papyrus is holding the orb. So to get the orb to you, Papyrus goes through the maze and then shows you where you need to go. Up next, you encounter Sans' puzzle, which is simply yesterday's crossword puzzle, and when you walk right past it, they start an argument over which is harder, word jumble or crossword. After the argument, you can move on to the next encounter with Dog Amy and Dog Ressa, who will ask you to identify your smells. After rolling around on the ground, they mistake your scent for that of a puppy, and thank you for expanding their minds when you pet them. Apparently they didn't know dogs can pet other dogs. When you next encounter Papyrus, he had just recalibrated one of his puzzles to look like his face, but then it froze like that and he forgot the answer to the puzzle, but his puzzle is easily solved. After this, you see Papyrus and Sans standing next to a strange looking machine, kinda like a really old computer. This is the next puzzle that you will have to deal with. This puzzle has a bunch of overcomplicated rules and weird ways that the tiles interact, and it is then randomly generated by the machine. But in the end, the machine always produces a straight line to the end, with tiles that you can't walk on at the top and bottom. Soon after this, you have an encounter with what appears to be the head of a guard dog, but his full body jumps up from the snow, and then begins the fight with Greater Dog. He is pacified by simply beckoning him over, petting him, playing with him, and then petting him twice. At the end of the path to Snowden, the game's first town, you have an encounter with Sans and Papyrus. Here, Papyrus reveals his last trap to you, where you need to get past a spiky ball, 2 spears, a flamethrower, a cannon, and a dog. Papyrus never fully deploys the trap though, saying that it would be much too easy to capture the human in this manner. After this, he runs off ahead and you can get access to the town. While in town, you can visit the shop, who in a minor twist on convention won't buy your items from you but will only sell to you. You can also rest at the inn, who doesn't really charge you anything because you only slept at the inn for 2 minutes and refunds you because of this. At the other side of town, you can find Papyrus's and Sans' house, with each one having a separate mailbox. Sans is full to the brim with mail, while Papyrus's is completely empty. Once you're ready, you can head out along the path on the other side of town. As you travel, your view begins to get obstructed by snow. Once you get far enough, Papyrus stops you and begins to talk to you. As he is about to offer to be your friend, he remembers that he is supposed to capture you. At this point, the boss fight with Papyrus begins, and in a somewhat humorous manner, his attacks are just bones that travel along the bottom of the screen. And you don't even need to do anything to dodge them, and the only way you can get hurt is if you intentionally get in the way of them. You can try and flirt with Papyrus, whereupon he is unsure what to do. By saying that you have no redeeming qualities, he knows how humble you are, saying that you remind him of himself, and that you're meeting all of his standards. He then reveals to you his fabled blue attack, whereupon you are bombarded with a whole bunch of blue bones which you can take care of by not moving. At the end of what appears to be his attack, your heart turns blue and you drop to the bottom of the combat box. The game was kind of playing around with that blue attack. It implied that it was just that you had to not move when you're being hit by it, but the game actually turned you blue, and when you're blue you have gravity, and avoiding attacks becomes more like a platformer than a bullet hell. This is where the fight with Papyrus really begins, with him doing silly things during the fight, such as dabbing different products behind his ears before eventually realizing that he doesn't have ears, but now you actually have to try and avoid his attacks. If you manage to lose the fight at any point, Papyrus captures you and holds you inside of his garage with some dog food and water to keep you going, but like at the bridge, the bars are too wide to actually keep you in the garage. You're able to fail the fight 3 times, and after that he gives up on trying to capture you and decides to let you pass by. So now back to the fight. Once you reach the end, he is going to show you his special attack, but it ended up getting chewed on and apparently eaten by the dog he'd used as part of the trap back at the bridge. Instead, Papyrus decides to use a really special normal attack, and after you clear it, he says that it's clear that you can't beat him and decides to show you mercy, and at this point, you're allowed to spare him. After this, you talk to Papyrus for a minute, and you can say that you want to be his friend, or you can call him a loser. But if you do call him a loser, he misunderstands you and thinks that you're calling yourself a loser. Either way, Papyrus is your friend now. Papyrus then goes on to explain that to get out of the underground, you'll need to travel to the city of Newhome and through the king's castle, but he says that Asgore is a big softie, so he will likely let you go right on through. A little further up ahead, you can find Sans at an outpost, and in the same area, you can also meet the character of Monster Kid. He has snuck out of his house and away from his parents in the hopes of meeting or seeing Undyne, who Papyrus had mentioned earlier. Before continuing on, I talk to Sans, who says that he works 2 jobs, because if he does, he gets twice as many legally required breaks, and he offers to spend one of them with you at Grillby's. Sans then takes you there via some shortcut, and you both just kinda appear at Grillby's. While there, he asks you what you think about his brother. Sans also asks if you know anything about a talking flower. Sans then goes on to talk about the Echo Flower, a type of flower that grows all over the upcoming area. Sans then reveals that Papyrus told him that a flower sometimes appears to him, giving him advice, flattery, and of all things, predictions. Sans just chalks it up to someone using an Echo Flower to play a trick on Papyrus and asks you to keep an eye out for him. But before you can try and explain anything to Sans, he leaves and you can head off to the next area of Waterfall. Up until this point, the areas have been somewhat lighthearted and pleasant, but things change once you walk into Waterfall. Shortly after walking in, you see a dark figure clad in heavy metal armor, and you go hide in some grass below as you overhear Papyrus come and talk to them. He explains that he didn't capture you and tries to convince Undyne to leave you alone. This fails and Papyrus returns to his home. The scene then moves down, and when you try and move, Undyne notices and moves down, pulling out a magical spear as she observes the grass. After a moment, she goes up on trying to find you and takes a few steps back, disappearing into the shadows before you're given control again. You're now being hunted by Undyne, the Undying. After exiting the grass, you have your first encounter with Monster Kid outside of the chance you get to talk to him near Sans' outpost. He is amazed that Undyne was looking right at you. After this, he departs and the music for Waterfall begins to play. The song is a mix between eerie and oppressive. Much of the color scheme of the area is mostly cold blues and purples as well. As well as this, at certain points during your trip through Waterfall, you can see crystals on the ceiling. These crystals look like stars twinkling in the night sky, lending even more to the atmosphere of Waterfall. After a bit, the player finds themselves on a dock, and after moving over a screen, the lighting changes back to the way it was when you first saw Undyne. Now the player is bathed in darkness, always being approximately half covered in shadows, while also casting a long shadow at the same time. As you walk along the pier, a spear is thrown down ahead of you, and Undyne steps out of the shadows. All you can do is run as she relentlessly throws a barrage of spears at you. Eventually you make it back to land and run into some tall grass, and Undyne becomes unable to throw spears at you, but she follows closely behind you and walks into the tall grass. She stops then reaches down but pulls up Monster Kid instead of you. She then puts him back down and backs off, allowing you to exit the grass. Again, Monster Kid follows shortly behind you, amazed that Undyne touched him, saying that he's never going to wash his face again. The next area is a bit of a safe zone. The music is now much quieter compared to Waterfall, and now taking on a more somber and downtrodden feel when compared to the eerie and oppressive track that had just been playing. As well as this, some more light is injected into the scenery, as most of the water you are now around is more of a glowy bright blue instead of the black it was before. It also gives off a strange particle effect, but shortly after this goes away. While traveling through Waterfall, you can find a room with a piano in it, some writing on the wall, and some symbols that light up whenever you press the use key while having an arrow held down. Further up ahead, you find a statue that has rain falling on it through a hole in the roof. If you find and give it an umbrella, a song begins to play and the notes that you need to play on the piano also appear above it. Once you play the melody at the piano, a door opens at the back of the room, and behind the door you find what appears to be a legendary artifact, and you can go and try and pick it up. But, unfortunately for you, you can't pick it up. You're carrying too many dogs. So you check your inventory and find an annoying dog. If you use it or drop it, the dog is then deployed and it appears to absorb the artifact itself and then leaves the screen. Inside your bag you find dog residue. This item is actually surprisingly useful. What you can use it for is whenever you use it, it fills up all the empty space in your bags with either dog salad or more dog residue. Dog salad heals you for a random amount chosen from either 2, 10, 30, and full. This can be pretty useful, but it can get kind of annoying when you keep getting the 2 health amount. So continuing on, you have an encounter with Monster Kid who will join you, either so you aren't both alone in the rain or because you have an umbrella. Eventually on the path you find a ledge which he helps you up. He then says that he's going to try and find his way around so that he can rejoin you. After this you find a bridge, and again after transitioning the scene, the lighting changes so your character is bathed in darkness. After progressing far enough, spears begin to shoot up from the ground around you and Undyne begins to hunt you again. Eventually you run out of places to run and find yourself at a dead end, and when you try to go back you find that Undyne is between you and the exit. For some reason she creates some spears that hit the bridge and the side that you're standing on falls with you along with it. The fall renders you unconscious and you have a dream. In it, a voice talks about hearing a noise and upon going to investigate finds you. They get your name and you are about to get theirs, but you begin to wake up and you don't get to learn what their name actually is. When you wake up, you find yourself in a garbage dump. While making your way to the exit, you get attacked by an animated dummy. Apparently his cousin used to live inside a dummy as well, but claimed that when you talked to him, you spooked him out of his body. The dummy then begins to hit you. You defeat him by getting his little buddies that he uses to attack you to attack him instead. After a bit, the fight ends when Napsplook shows up. The dummy leaves before Napsplook comes over to you both. Napsplook immediately apologizes, thinking that the dummy was your friend and that he caused the dummy to leave. After this, he invites you to check out his house. At his house, you can do a few activities, my personal favorite being when you just lay down on the ground and feel like garbage, which, if you do this long enough, everything begins to fade away and you slowly become one with the universe. After you remove yourself from that acid trip and continue onwards, you again encounter Undyne. She traps you in a dead end using the darkness so that you don't realize that you're being trapped. At the last second before she's going to start the fight, Monster Kid jumps out of the bushes in between the two of you. Just as he is about to realize what's going on, she grabs him by the ear and pulls him away. Also, I should note one of the enemies in the upcoming zone. This enemy goes by the name of Temmie, and their face doesn't really like to stay with their body, kinda like a certain someone else from another game I played recently. So back to the story. Up ahead we have an encounter with Monster Kid on a bridge. He comes to the realization that you're human and asks that you insult him because you're enemies now, but I refuse to. He quickly gives up on the idea of trying to fight you and instead decides to return home, but before he can make his way back across the bridge he trips and nearly falls off. At this moment Undyne appears, and I choose to go back to help him up. As thanks for saving him, he stands between me and Undyne, and she is forced to retreat. He then thanks you for saving him before finally returning home. Immediately afterwards you go to enter a tunnel, but Undyne is sitting atop of it and stops you. She's about to tell you the story of her people, but decides that screw it, she's about to kill you anyway, so there's no point in telling you. Undyne then mocked me for my pacifist ways and tells me that I am what stands in the way of everyone's hopes and dreams. She then says that once you try and enter the tunnel, she will stop you. With no other way forward, I entered the tunnel. Undyne immediately drops down from the top of the cave and combat begins. Before anything can happen, she swipes at you with her spear, turning your heart green. This gives you a barrier that you can control and use to block her attacks. The downside is that while your heart is green, you are unable to flee. So for now you just need to attempt to survive her attacks while waiting for her to make your heart red again, so that way you can escape. Once she turns your heart red again, you can flee, running up into the tunnel. But unfortunately, Undyne is faster than you and quickly catches up, again turning you green before anything in the combat can happen. After this, you have to wait to be turned red, again. And once you do, you can begin to escape, again. But she's so faster than you and is able to catch up, turning you green and getting visibly annoyed with you for running away. One last time you need to withstand her assault before fleeing. After this point she can still catch you, but you won't be turned green, so you're immediately able to run away before she gets the chance to attack you. As you keep running, you get a call from Papyrus putting the chase on hold. He says that you, him, and Undyne should all hang out sometimes, and that Undyne would probably make great pals. Once you hang up, the chase continues. Shortly after this, you run into Hotland. Once you make it there, Undyne continues her pursuit, but due to the heat of the zone, quickly becomes exhausted and collapses. Luckily, there is a water cooler nearby, so you revive her by pouring some water on her. After she gets up, she wordlessly gives up on the pursuit, retreating instead of continuing to chase you. Up next, you find a fork in the path. Two black knights guard the pathway that goes up, so instead you have to head to the right, which takes you to the lab that is located here in Hotland. Upon entering the lab, you find it to be dimly lit. As you go forward, you see your face on the screen, but the screen is playing live. Once you make it to the other side of the room, a door opens and the person running the lab steps outside. Dr. Alfie steps out from behind the door, going to turn on the lights to the lab. When she does, she realizes that you have made your way to the lab, and she freaks out a little bit, saying that she didn't expect you to be here so soon. She then begins to explain the situation, saying that she is the royal scientist assigned to the role by Asgore. She has been watching you since you first stepped out of the ruins, and apparently that's what the camera in the bushes was for. She goes on to explain that initially she's going to try and stop you, but as she explains, watching someone on a screen can really make you root for them, so she instead decided that she was going to help guide you through Hotlands instead. Alphys goes on to explain that there is one issue. There's a robot that she made a long time ago known as Mettaton. He was given some anti-human features, but she tried to remove them, but she failed on that, and now he's an unstoppable killer robot. Before the conversation can continue on much further, you hear some banging. A flash of light engulfs the screen and everything goes black. After a few moments, a spotlight comes on and Mettaton the robot busts into the room. The thing about Mettaton is that he isn't just a robot that's out to kill you. He's a robot that's out to kill you and is also a TV star. So, in his first appearance in this chapter, he forces you into a quiz show, which if you fail, you die. Each turn he asks you a question, and you answer it by moving your heart to the answer that you want to choose, but luckily you can cheat on the quiz show because Dr. Alphys tells you the answers using hand signs. If you don't notice this, or you don't happen to answer in time somehow, you take damage for not answering correctly. After one question about a game that Alphys is a big fan of, she can't help but blurt out the answer. At this point, Mettaton realizes that she was helping you out. He then asks a question that she is sure to know the answer to, that question being who she has a crush on. Each answer has some pretty good results, but none of them are considered incorrect. Once this question is answered, Mettaton departs, and after that, Alphys asks to see your phone, commenting that it's ancient. She then takes it from you real quick, upgrading with several features including texting and access to a certain social media network. She then adds you on that social media but promptly forgets that she did so. After this, you are allowed to explore some of the lab or continue on with your journey. As you journey through Hotland, you'll be constantly stopped to receive calls, texts, or status updates from Alphys talking about a whole variety of simple things. Mostly this is just done to make fun of other games constantly interrupting the player with dumb little things. At the start, you're just getting status updates from her, and these are mostly just about her going to call you, but not getting the courage to. Once she finally does call, she immediately hangs up before you can even talk to her. She calls back again on the next screen to explain the lasers. After the call, she sends out an update saying just how nervous she was to call. As you progress, she continues to try and help you out, but isn't very useful at the start, mostly just slowing you down as you try and get through the zone. Eventually, you find yourself in a dark room. Alphys hacks the lights to turn them on, and it turns out that you're on the set of one of Mettaton's shows, and apparently this is a cooking show. Mettaton then asks you to gather up a few materials for him to make a cake. Once you gather the milk, sugar, and eggs, he reveals that he's forgotten one of the ingredients, and that ingredient is a human soul. He then begins to approach you with a chainsaw, but Alphys calls in and drops him before he can, asking if there's a substitute for your human soul for anyone who's vegan. He says that there is a substitute and asks you to go get it from a nearby counter, but upon making it to the counter, it suddenly rises high up into the air, making it so you won't be able to get the substitute. Luckily for you, Alphys came prepared and she added a jetpack to your phone. Not really sure how that's supposed to work, but somehow it does, and you have to try and race to the top and get the substitute in 1 minute, otherwise Mettaton kills you. After this, Mettaton leaves and you're free to continue your way through Hotland. On the next scene you can see the core in the distance. The core uses geothermal energy to produce power, and inside it is an elevator that can get you to the castle. After a bit, you again encounter the two knights who are standing guard at the start of Hotland. They come to warn you about a human going around who is in a striped shirt. They're about to lead you to safety before realizing that you're the human. The two then try and stop you, but you can get them to spare you by cleaning off the armor of one of the knights. This causes him to start heating up and he takes off the armor. You can then tell the other to confess his true feelings and they decide to go get ice cream after this. A little bit after this, you find yourself in a dark room again. Once Alphys hacks the lights and turns them on, it is revealed that you are on one of Mettaton's shows. Again. Now you're supposed to fill in as the news anchor. Mettaton tasks you with finding something to report on. Once you decide on something in the surrounding area, Mettaton reveals that whatever it is you chose is actually a bomb. The set falls away for Mettaton to reveal that everything around you is a bomb and that you have 2 minutes to disarm them all, or else a mega bomb will go off. Again, Alphys was prepared and installed a bomb diffuser in your phone. Once all of the other bombs are defused, Alphys contains the cup bomb in an electromagnetic field and you defuse it. At this point, Mettaton congratulates you and he reveals that the mega bomb will actually explode in 2 seconds. After a few moments of anticipation, Alphys calls again, revealing that she managed to hack the bomb and deactivate it. Mettaton curses her hacking skills before retreating again. After that, you can continue on. Now finally getting to be near to be able to reach the core, you take an elevator up. At the top you find Miss Muffet. There she is selling some spider pastries, but they cost 9,999 gold, so they're well beyond the amount of gold that I had at that point. After solving a few puzzles to open a door, you find yourself in a room covered in what appears to be spiderwebbing. And as you walk, you hear someone taunting you, mentioning things that they've heard about you. As you cross the webbing, you get caught in it and begin to slow down until you finally can't move anymore. At this point, Miss Muffet reveals herself to you and her boss fight begins. She begins the battle by turning the player purple. This causes the player to have to go between one of 3 rolls to try and dodge the incoming attack, but this combat encounter can be easily skipped by eating a spider pastry that you can buy pretty cheap at the ruins. Eating the pastry in front of her shows her that you are willing to help the spiders, and so she lets you pass. Soon after this, you again find yourself on the set of one of Mettaton's shows. This time he's hiding behind a wall and leans out from behind it. Mettaton then steps out from behind the wall and reveals that he is wearing a dress. He comes down the stairs and sings you a song before dropping you down into the dungeon. Down here he reveals the next game that you're going to play, and it's one of the puzzles from the path to Snowdin. The puzzle, from what I can tell, is impossible to complete. Once you run out of time, 2 firewalls begin to close in on you, but again Alphys is able to hack into the system and stops them just in time. Mettaton then tells you that one of the squares you stepped on would have caused an encounter, but you didn't get one, so now you're going to fight him. The combat begins, but immediately Alphys calls you and tells you to press the yellow button on your phone. When you do, your heart turns from red to yellow, and you are able to shoot little bullets by pressing Z. You are then able to shoot Mettaton, who retreats from the fight, allowing you to make your escape from the puzzle. Up ahead you find MTT Resort, which is Mettaton's resort. Behind it you find the path to the core, so you can make your way up to the castle. As you make your way back to the core, you see 2 shadowy figures walk back into it. Alphys notes that there shouldn't be anyone here, but encourages you to go forward, as you can't let anything stop you now. In the next room is a fork in the road. She tells you to go right, but once you do, you find a dead end. So Alphys recommends that you take the other door, and once you do, you're quickly attacked by Mad Jack, one of the shadowy figures. After sparing him, Alphys questions why there are so many monsters, but reassures you that it's alright, but doesn't appear to believe this much herself. She continues to try and guide you through the core, and while she is more confident with calling you, she appears to be much less confident in the advice that she is giving. At one point you go through a room filled with lasers and she manages to hack them to turn them all off. But as you're halfway through the room, the lasers turn back on and she ends up having to turn them off over and over again while you progress through the room. Right afterwards you reach a crossroads and she begins to tell you where to go. But she admits that she isn't sure where you should go, saying that the area that you're in doesn't look like her map at all. She then says that she needs to go, leaving you to find your way through the rest of the core. After solving a few puzzles, you reach the elevator that will get you into the castle, but Mettaton is standing in your way and decides to spill the beans on what's going on with Alphys. Mettaton explains that while watching you on screen, Alphys slowly grew attached to your adventure and wanted to have a place in it. So to get her place in it, she reactivated puzzles, disabled elevators, and enlisted Mettaton to torment you. That way she could save you from the dangers that she had manufactured, thus making herself look better and earning her a spot in your adventure. Mettaton then explains that part of the reason that she left was so that she could reach the core and arrive just in time to deactivate Mettaton, thus saving you from him and becoming the hero of your adventure. He then goes on to explain that he has no desire to harm humans and that he actually just wants to put on a good show. And what is a good show without a dramatic plot twist? The door that Alphys would have entered through then closes and locks behind you, and Mettaton's grand finale begins. The fight begins with your heart already being yellow. Attempting to shoot him reveals that he was just pretending to be harmed when you used it on him last time. He then explains that you are weak, and if you continue forward, Asgore will kill you and take your soul. Once he has it, he ultimately plans to destroy humanity, but if Mettaton gets your soul, he will use it to be able to save humanity. And in stopping Asgore's plans, he'll be able to cross the barrier into the human world, becoming a huge star after he crosses over. At this point, Alphys calls you and explains that Mettaton has a hidden switch on the back of his body. If you can turn him around and hit it, he'll become vulnerable. Once you flip Mettaton's switch, he begins to freak out, shaking violently before the screen is consumed with a bright light. You then hear him say, before the lights begin to clear. 2 stage lights come down and show a silhouette, and once the smoke is cleared and his Mettaton EX form is revealed to you, the real fight can begin. At the top left corner you can see ratings which start at about 4,000 but begin to drop as you do nothing. In actions you can get a few options, these options being boast, pose, and heel turn. When you boast, the ratings go up as long as you don't get hit, but if you get hit, you lose ratings. When you pose, you get bonus ratings, but you also get more as you pose when you're at lower health. And when you heel turn, you get bonus ratings when you get hit. During the fight, Mettaton himself will do poses as well, and as the fight goes on, he switches between poses faster and faster. Also at certain points he reveals his heart for an attack. Hitting him causes him to lose his arms, but he's fine since it's merely a flesh wound. Or a metal wound, I guess. Once you've damaged his heart enough for him to have lost his arms and legs, and you've gotten the ratings to over 10,000, the fight ends. The fight ends once Mediton sees the ratings, seeing them reach the highest that they've ever been. So, one lucky caller will have the chance to talk to him before he leaves for the surface. The person who calls in is implied to be Napsbluk, who calls in to share their story, that their life is kinda boring, and that seeing Mediton on screen brought some excitement to their life even if it was vicariously. They then admit that they're going to miss Mediton before they hang up. Mediton tries to stop them, but it's too late, so he decides to take another caller. He then receives several calls, all expressing gratitude for brightening up their day. Moved by the adoration of his fans, Mediton decides to give up on his plan to steal your soul and become humanity's next big star, saying that humanity already has its stars and idols, but he's the only ones that the monsters have. He also admits that he was wrong about you and that you're actually strong, maybe even strong enough to get past Asgore, and that he trusts that you'll be able to protect humanity. At last, Mediton tells you that the form his body is currently in is very inefficient in energy usage and that in a few moments he's going to shut down, but before he does, he tells you to knock him dead before shutting off. Once the battle is over, Alphys is finally able to unlock the door and she enters the room. She sees the powerless Mediton and she is initially worried, but realizes that it's just the batteries, and since he's a robot, she should be able to fix it. She tells you to leave for a minute, but shortly into the next room she decides to catch up to you, apologizing before deciding to continue on. She says how excited you must be to meet Asgore as well. She then tells you that you'll finally be able to go home, but once you get to the elevator she stops you. Unable to handle it anymore, she admits that she lied to you, and that if you want to go home, your soul on its own won't be strong enough. You'll have to kill Asgore and take his soul to be able to pass through the barrier. She then departs to allow you to take the elevator to New Home. After a short walk along the path, you enter a somewhat familiar scene. You find yourself in a courtyard similar to the one outside of Toriel's house in the ruins, although there's no color here aside from the player, 2 gifts inside, and the yellow flowers. Once you enter the home, you'll begin to encounter monsters from throughout your journey, but instead of fighting you, they begin to talk to you, explaining some of the backstory of the world. They explain that a long time ago, a human fell into the ruins, and being injured by their fall, they called out for help. They were found by the king's son, Azrael Dreamer. Azrael brought the human child back to his parents, and they adopted the child. Over time, the two grew to be like siblings, and the king and queen treated the human as their own child. But then one day the human became very ill and they had only one request. That request was to see the flowers from their village one last time, but there was no way to pass the barrier to allow them to do so. On the next day the human died from the sickness. Azrael, distraught with grief, absorbed the human's soul and became a being with immense power. He then used the power to pass through the barrier with the human's body, bringing them back to their village. Once he had made it to the human's village, he found a bed of golden flowers in the center. He then carried and placed the human's body onto that bed of flowers, but was seen by the humans who assumed that he had killed the child. Azrael with the human soul could have easily destroyed the village, but he did not. Instead, he smiled and walked away, returning to the underground. The wounds delivered onto him by the villagers proved to be fatal, but he managed to make it back to the castle before collapsing. He died there, his dust spreading across the garden, and where he died, later a golden flower sprouted. The underground fell into despair as the king and queen lost 2 children in one night. The humans had once again taken everything from the monsters. In his grief, the king resolved to end the monster's suffering. He decided that every human who fell into the underground must die, and once they had collected 7 human souls, he'd be able to shatter the barrier, freeing the monsters from the underground. Already, King Asgore has collected 6 of the 7 souls that he would need to be able to shatter the barrier. All he needs is yours. After this, you have no more monster encounters, and as you continue forward, you find yourself in the last corridor. Your character has no color, being only a black outline. As you are about to reach the end, you are stopped by another black figure. You can hear bells ring, and before you stand Sans. Before you go to have your meeting with King Asgore, he will judge you for everything that you have done throughout the game. Sans says that you will be judged for every action and for every EXP that you have earned during the game. He then explains to you exactly what EXP is. It's an acronym that stands for Execution Points. EXP or Execution Points are a way of quantifying the pain that you have caused to others. When you kill someone, your EXP increases, and when you gain enough EXP, your love or LV increases. LV is also an acronym. It stands for Level of Violence. It is a way of measuring someone's capacity to hurt others. The more things/people you kill, the easier it becomes to distance yourself from the pain that you cause and the pain that you feel. Although I didn't kill anything for this playthrough of the game, this explains why you gain health as you gain love, because as you gain love, you distance yourself more and more from the pain, which is represented by you gaining more health. But I never gained any love, and while I never gained any love, that doesn't mean that I was innocent or naive. It just means that I always had a certain consideration for others and a tenderness in my heart. Despite it not always being the easiest thing to do, I decided to always try and do the right thing and to always spare others to not do any harm. Sans then explains that as he sees it, there are only 2 options: let Asgore kill you and take your soul and destroy humanity, or you can kill him, but if you kill him, the monsters will be stuck in the underground. Sans then explains one last game mechanic to you. Since you are a human, you have something that monsters don't, and that is determination. Through determination, you are able to bring yourself back from the dead at a save point. Sans then wishes you good luck before disappearing, allowing you to go forward to go and finally meet King Asgore. Before you go to meet him, however, there is one room in particular that I'd like to mention. There is a room with several graves in it, each one has a heart of a different color, but the only one that you can reach has a red heart on it and it has your name on it as well. Once you walk into the throne room, you can see Asgore standing there with his back turned to you. He is humming to himself before he notices that someone has entered the throne room. He asks that you wait a moment as he is just about done watering the flowers. Once he is done and turns around to see you, he goes to greet you, before realizing who you are. He says that he wishes he could make you some tea, but you both know that can't happen. He delays slightly, talking about the weather and gazing out the window, but eventually he invites you to meet him at the barrier. At the barrier, he offers you one final chance to go take care of any unfinished business that you might want to tend to before finishing everything. Once you say that you are ready, he raises the 6 human souls that he has kept in glass containers and the fight begins. A strange light fills the room as twilight filters in through the barrier. Asgore says that it was nice to meet you before pulling out his weapon, and his first act is to swiftly move over and smash the mercy button, leaving you unable to use it. The only way to proceed in this fight is to try and damage Asgore. Throughout the fight, his battle sprite depicts him with his head facing downwards as he can't bring himself to look at the protagonist, showing his reluctance to fight you. The player can also lower Asgore's attack and defense by trying to talk to him 3 times. This makes it so that his attacks don't hit as hard and so that he takes more damage from your attacks as well. Another thing to show his reluctance to kill you is that while his attacks normally deal 5 damage, if you equip the armor that you would find in the grayscale version of Toria's house, he can't kill you in 4 hits. Anything that would bring your health from 5 to 0 instead brings your health to 1, allowing you to heal, but any damage taken while you're at 1 health will kill you outright. As the fight goes on, his attacks all become faster and in other ways more difficult to dodge, and once you have him at a little lower than half his health, he begins to take more damage from your hits as well. You leave him with a sliver of health and he collapses onto the ground. He then talks about the day that he lost his son and the first human. He says that in a fit of anger he declared war on the humans. He said that he would destroy any human that came into the underground and that he'd use their power to become godlike so that he could free them from the underground and destroy humanity so that the monsters could rule the surface in peace. He says that he never wanted to hurt anyone, he just wanted others to have hope. He laments what he's done and asks you to finish him so that you can end this war. The player is then presented the option to attack him, or they can choose the Shattered Mercy option. Choosing Mercy gives the king hope that after everything he has done you'd still choose to live in the underground and suffer with the rest of the monsters. He says that as long as he remains, that him and his wife will look after you as best as they can. Part of this seems to be him wanting to recapture the family that he had lost. If at this point you didn't already know from having played the game or just by guessing it, Asgore's wife is Toriel, and she left him after he declared war on humanity and she hid away from him in the ruins. Toriel decided to stay in the ruins to try and save the humans who had fallen down from being killed by Asgore, but somehow he managed to collect the souls of the 6 humans who had fallen down before you. So anyway, back to Asgore. Once he says that you could be like a family, he is surrounded by a bunch of small pellets. They'll quickly close in on him and kill him, and one more strikes his soul after he dies, ensuring the player can't claim his soul and leave. Flowey then appears before the player and claims the 6 human souls for himself. He reaffirms his idea that in this world is either kill or be killed, and he takes the human souls into himself and your game crashes. When you try and restart the game, the normal introduction that plays is messed up, and when you are presented the save, you see that the name is now Flowey and his LV, or Love of Violence, is 9,999, and you are in his world. Once you hit continue, you can walk forward and see your old save file, but it's then erased and smashed by Flowey, who thanks you for taking care of Asgore and allowing him to get the 6 human souls. These souls allow him to control your save file. The fight then begins as Flowey takes on his new form, that being this Eldritch Abomination here. During the fight, you are occasionally allowed to attack him, and periodically, one of the souls is able to act up, and once you call out for help, they are able to heal you. As the fight goes on, it gets more complex, and eventually he starts to save the game mid-fight. He then reloads the save to make dodging more difficult, but slowly you are able to call out to each of the 6 souls. Once you have done this, they all temporarily leave Flowey, granting you healing to get you back to full health. His defense then drops to 0, and you can now more consistently attack him, hitting him for 150 to 200 damage on each hit instead of 1 to 3. Soon you are able to bring Flowey's health all the way down to 0, and he begins to lament his defeat, saying how he can't believe this happened, but then he reloads the save so that his health is full again, and he then one-shots the player and saves the game. He then kills your character multiple times in rapid succession before leaving you with no health and surrounded with pellets, but when they are about to hit you, instead of killing you, they heal you. Flowey is shocked and surprised by this happening and tries to load a save, but the load fails. He then asks where his powers went before the souls all emerge, openly rebelling against him and stopping his plan. The player is then presented the option to either finish him off or spare him. As you try and spare him, he refuses, threatening to kill you and everyone you love, but as you keep sparing him, he gets more and more confused and desperate, exclaiming that he can't understand. At this point, you can now leave the underground. Based on what you did during your playthrough, you get a call from Sans and he lets you know about everything that happened. None of these endings are really all that happy because you didn't do the true pacifist playthrough. After this call, Flowey appears before the player and informs them of what they need to do to achieve the true pacifist ending, and that there are 4 main things that you need to do. You need to go on a date with Papyrus, Undyne, and Alphys, and after this you need to go visit the true lab, which is hidden below Alphys' lab. The dates are all pretty funny, but aside from Undyne's house burning down during her date, and then her and Alphys getting together after Alphys' date, they don't have much of an impact on the story. But after Alphys' date, as you are leaving the area, you get a call from Papyrus who tells you to head to Alphys' lab, although he is rather evasive about why he thinks that you should go there. Upon arriving at her lab, you find that Alphys isn't there, but there is a note sitting in front of a door that was previously locked. On it, she thanks you and all her friends for your support, but says that you can't make her problems go away and that she intends to face them head on. But if you never hear from her again and want to know the truth, then you should enter the door to the north. So obviously we enter the door, and inside is an elevator which you begin to take down, but something goes wrong and the elevator ends up falling down into the true lab. To progress through the lab you need to find 4 keys, and to get most of them you need to deal with the horrifying creatures known as the Amalgamates. Each one is unique and is made using creatures that you've encountered throughout the game. Along the way through the lab you are able to find entries written by Dr. Alphys that reveal more backstory of the game. So there was an old royal scientist, but he disappeared in mysterious circumstances and Asgore ended up replacing him with Alphys, and he tasked her with unleashing the power of the soul. She explains that the barrier is locked by soul power and that unfortunately soul power cannot be created artificially, and so to create more they will need to use what they have, the souls of monsters. But there are 2 problems. Extracting a soul requires a lot of power and would kill the host. The other problem is that the soul of a monster also disappears immediately when the monster dies, so they can't even collect the soul of monsters who die. So she decided to research humans, and she ended up finding the power of determination. This allows the human with the most determination to persist after death and come back at save points, essentially allowing them to change the timeline. So what Alphys did is that she got Asgore to collect the bodies of monsters who were near to death but were still alive and had them brought to the true lab. There she injected them with determination to see what happened to their souls. She also mentions that they'll need a vessel to wield the monster's souls when the time comes, because humans can't absorb the human souls and monsters can't absorb other monster souls, so she thinks of using something that is neither human nor monster. So without telling Asgore, Alphys took the first golden flower to have grown in Asgore's garden. That was the flower that was brought back from the outside world by Azrael when he absorbed the first human soul. She then returns to talking about the experiments with the monsters and notes that none of them have died. They were all comatose, but they haven't turned into dust, and some of the families were expecting the dust back for funerals. Since they aren't dying, Alphys decides to keep injecting the monsters with determination, hoping that it'll work, and after a little while, one of the monsters returns to life. Eventually, all of the subjects that Alphys was sent wake up and walk around and talk like normal, so she sends the souls back to Asgore and returns the vessel to the garden, having thought that the experiment was a failure, and lets the families know that their loved ones are alive. But before she can send everyone back, she learns a sick truth about the monsters' bodies. They aren't able to handle determination, so when injected with it, their bodies broke down and melted together, becoming the Amalgamates. Shortly after this, the flower that she had used as a vessel disappears as well, and she keeps getting calls from the families wondering when their loved ones will be coming home. Alphys gives up on trying to answer the phone calls altogether. Alphys also collected a few VHS tapes that were recorded by Toriel, the first human in Azrael that Asgore didn't know about, and you are able to view these within the True Lab as well. For the most part, the tapes depict these 4 just being a family together. Of note though is that the first human in Azrael had apparently hatched a plan to leave the underground so that they could get 6 human souls. Apparently part of the plan involved the first human eating buttercups, but they didn't share the full details of the plan with Azrael, and they didn't share any of it with Toriel or Asgore, so it's revealed that the human dying and Azrael taking their soul might have been planned by the human for an unknown reason. So this is all the information that you can gather from the True Lab, and after getting all 4 of the keys you can turn on the power, and Alphys explains some of the situation I just went over. She also says that the reason she might not have come back was out of shame and not because the Amalgamates would kill her. She admits that she was afraid to tell the families about the horrific things that had happened because of her, so she didn't tell anyone. And she also stopped trying to develop anything because of how bad her previous work had turned out. But thanks to meeting you, she decided to face her fears head on because she knows that she can depend on her friends for support, and she leaves to go tell everyone about the truth herself. As you go to leave, you pass through an elevator, but once you step inside, the power turns on and you receive a phone call from an unknown person. They say thank you for causing all of the pieces to fall into place. The elevator then raises to New Home and you are unable to return to any places earlier in the game. Again you have to go fight Asgore, but this time something different happens. As the fight is about to start, a small fireball appears and hits Asgore, sending him flying off screen. Then Toriel appears before you, explaining that she knew what you would have to do and simply couldn't let you live with that terrible burden. After this, all of the friends that you have made throughout your journey will show up to try and stop the fight, but each one realizes that they didn't need to since Toriel had already done so. Once everyone has gathered, Alphys reveals that Papyrus called everyone together and asks how he knew to call everybody. He responds by telling her that a small yellow flower told him to. At this point, Flowey appears to ruin the ending, creating massive green vines that grab and trap all of your friends. He explains that he is doing this because if you leave the underground you win, and if you win you won't come to play with him anymore. He says that he'll just dangle victory in front of you just to keep you going, but if you do manage to somehow beat him, he'll bring all of your friends back, but that won't happen and instead you'll be stuck dying over and over again. He then traps your heart in a box so that you won't be able to move, and over again he hits you with pellets. Just to be dramatic, he has the last bullet slowly close in on you, but before they can hit you, a circle of fireballs appear around you, preventing you from getting hit by them. Toriel then says that no matter what, her and the rest of your friends will always be there for you. Frustrated, Flowey tries to attack you again, but each time your friends intervene, healing you as they do. Eventually, all of the monsters from the underground gather and it appears that Flowey is cornered, but instead this works to his advantage as he takes the 6 human souls and uses their power to collect all of the monster souls, and their power combined is enough to match the 7th human soul, making Flowey a god. His first act is to return to his original form, making him not a flower anymore, and with the power of a god at his disposal, the final fight of Undertale begins. Azrael attacks you each turn and any attempt to damage him causes you to miss, but you do have 2 actions that you can take under the act menu. You can hope and you can dream. Dreaming fills your inventory with an item called Last Dream, which through your determination becomes real and is able to heal you, and hoping decreases how much damage you take while healing you a little bit as well. All you can do is dodge attacks as you keep yourself alive on hopes and dreams, and in the event that you do die, your heart will split like a normal death, but before shattering, it comes back together, refusing to die. Azrael continues to taunt you, saying that he doesn't care about destroying the world anymore, and that once he destroys you and gains total control over everything, he intends to just reset it all. In doing so, he will return everyone's memories to 0. That way you can do it all over again, because he knows you will, and you'll just keep losing to him over and over again, all because you want a good ending, because you love your friends, because you'll never give up. Once he tires of taunting you, he harnesses the full power of his determination and uses an attack that ends everything, but you manage to live even through that, and at that point, he reveals he's been using only a fraction of his power. Azrael then shows his final form, and all you can attempt to do in your action is struggle, but this does nothing to help you. You try and reach for your save, but are unable to, but you think with what little power you have left, you can save something else. At this point, the act menu is replaced with the save menu, and you then save all of your friends through undergoing actions that they recognize to restore their memories and personalities. Once you have saved Papyrus, Sans, Undyne, Alphys, Toriel, and Asgore, you are brought back to the battle menu, and there appears to be one less person you need to save. You reach out and call to Azrael. The game then cuts to the last screen of the introduction to the game, showing the child laying on the ground of the ruins, but it continues with Azrael finding them laying there, approaching them before returning to Asgore and Toriel with the other child. It returns to the fight, and trying to save Azrael sees him react with a weird confusion. He asks what you did, asking what it is that he's feeling and what's happening to him before proclaiming that he doesn't need anyone. He raises his arms to attack, this one much larger than any previous attack, as if to prove to himself that he has it in himself to kill you, but the attack can't kill you, and he can only bring you down to 1 health. Azrael continues to attack you turn after turn, but the attacks grow weaker, eventually becoming similar to the attacks that Toriel would use against you earlier in the game when you only had 2 health in her boss fight. As all of this is happening, he slowly begins to break down, initially getting angry at you for making him feel again, but this quickly fades and he admits to why he is doing all of this. The reason he is trying to keep you around is because you're the only one who understands him, and because he cares about you more than anyone else. He admits that he is not ready for this to end. He isn't ready to say goodbye. He begs you to stop doing this and just let him win, before gathering his power in a blast that encompasses the entire window for your heart. The attack brings you to 1 health, then 0.9 health, then 0.5, and lower, but at this point he can't bring himself to kill you. Unable to keep it up anymore, Azrael breaks down, admitting that he's just alone and afraid. He then reverts to his normal form and apologizes for what he did to you. He admits to himself and to you that your player character wasn't the person you named at the start of the game. The person you named was the first human who fell down. He then asks your name and you tell him that it's Frisk. He explains that when he was turned into a flower, he was soulless and lacked any emotions, but after he took in everyone's soul and you saved him, he was again given the power to feel. But he didn't simply feel his own emotions, but those of all the monsters that he absorbed as well. He says that he understands if you hate him and can't forgive him, but after everything there was no way I couldn't forgive him. He is surprised but happy that I did though. Azrael then shares with you the knowledge that he can't keep the 6 souls inside him much longer, but with the little time he has left he uses the 6 human souls and the souls of all the monsters in the underground to shatter the barrier, allowing them all to leave when they want to. He then informs you that in a little while he'll turn back into a flower, so you should forget about him because he'll stop being himself. He'll go back to being Flowey again. Before he turns back you can choose to comfort him. Again, I showed him kindness. Before departing he asks you to look after Asgore and Toriel for him, and with this, he departs. You are then awoken by your friends in the last room of the game, all of whom were concerned for you but are glad that you're awake now. You are given one last chance to talk to all the characters that you've met up until this point in the Underground, and if you go all the way back to the first room in the game, you can have one last conversation with Asriel. Asriel decided to use the last of his time to tend to the flowers at the start of the game. He says that he can't face the others because it will just break their hearts all over again to lose him once he turns back into a flower. He then admits why the first human climbed the mountain, and that was because they hated humanity. He then says that maybe they weren't the greatest person, but that you were a much better person, admitting that he wishes that you had been his friend the whole time. He then explains that when he absorbed the first human's soul, they had some degree of control over his body, and when they brought the human's body back to the village, the human actually wanted to slaughter the villagers, but Asriel held them back. Before you leave, he then asks that if you see him as Flowey in the future, to not think of that as him, and to remember him as he was in that moment. After this, you leave and return to the surface with all of your friends. Asgore appoints Frisk as the ambassador to humans, thanking them for everything that they've done. And as everyone enjoys the sunset, they all depart to go discover more about the above ground. Eventually, it's just Frisk and Toriel standing looking out at the sun. She asks if you have somewhere to return to. But I decided that I would stay with the friends that I'd made in the underground, and at this, Toriel grabs Frisk's hands and guides them away as the credits roll. After this, you get a mid-credit sequence showing what everyone did after reaching the surface. But there is another route through the game. This is the Genocide route. The requirement for this route is that you kill literally everything. You gotta farm encounters until no one shows up, and then you need to do that again for each area. After this point, when you would have gotten an encounter, a text box shows up that instead says, "But nobody came," and once this happens, the music changes to a distorted song for the rest of the area. For this route, you also need to kill each boss, and when you're following this route, some of the bosses change and the NPCs react differently to you, but the most notable is Sans, who becomes the final boss of the route. There are a lot of other changes made to how Undertale works if you're doing a Genocide route as well, such as monster encounters becoming less and less frequent as you get closer to killing each monster in an area. Many of the fights also see a change in difficulty when you're doing a Genocide route, with the fight against Undyne being much harder and the fight against Mettaton becoming much easier to the point that he dies in just one shot. Overall, I think the way the Genocide route contrasts with the Pacifist and even normal ending really goes to show the game's main themes. That being that while mercy and forgiveness can be difficult, in the end they are way more rewarding than cruelty and apathy towards other people. In the Pacifist ending, you are able to save all your friends and see redemption for the game's main antagonists, coming to help them get past that and hopefully forgiving them yourself. The normal endings, where you don't take the time to grow close to everyone or kill some of the monsters you encountered, you end up with a bunch of different endings, and the best one has the monsters not giving in to despair but still being trapped in the underground. And then there's the Genocide route. That ending begins with the boss battle with Sans, which I just want to show his first attack to kind of give an idea of what the fight as a whole will be like.
It's a beautiful day outside. Birds are singing, flowers are blooming. On days like these, kids like you should be burning in hell. What the fuck, game? What the fuck, game? What the fuck, game? Our fate rests upon you. Waffle, stay determined. What the fuck, game? What the fuck was that? What the fuck did you just do to me, game? Are you fucking real? What?
Yeah, and that's just his first attack. For the fight to end, you need to attempt to hit him 21 times, and after this, Sans begins to get tired and realizes that he can't really beat you, so he decides he's just going to do nothing. He's not going to pass his turn to you, so it's never going to be your turn and you won't be able to attack him. But if you don't touch the right side of the arena for long enough, he falls asleep and you can move the box to the side, allowing you to hit the attack button, killing him. After this, you go to fight Asgore and you immediately one-shot him. Flowey then shows up and finishes Asgore off before begging you to spare him, but you don't, and repeatedly attack Flowey until he turns into nothing. After this, the first human who you named at the start of the game appears before you, having been reawakened by your actions, and uses their power to end everything. All that is left is you, them, and the black void that everything was a part of. Now previously, when you wanted to start a new game, you could always open the game and reset everything, but you can't anymore. All you can see is the void, but if you leave the screen open for 10 minutes, the first human addresses you. They ask if you want to return to the world that you destroyed, then asking if you think you are above consequences. The correct answer is that you are not, and you can bring back the world that you destroyed, but it's going to cost you. The first human says that you do have one last thing that they want, and if you're going to give it to them, they will recreate the world for you. What they want is your soul. If you agree to give it to them, then they recreate the world, but any further playthroughs have their endings changed. In the Pacifist ending, either the picture you took with all your friends before departing has all of their faces crossed out and yours is replaced by the first humans. If you choose to stay with Toriel after she enters your room and places the pie on the ground and leaves, the first human then possesses you and looks at the camera as a low-pitched laughter accompanies it. In the end, while it does take effort on the player's part, the most satisfying ending is the pacifist ending, where you take the time to not harm anyone and even go out of your way to befriend people even if they hadn't been kind to you. By keeping a certain tenderness in your heart, you are able to save everyone, and you are even able to reach out and save the one person who needed it the most. In the neutral ending, you mainly save yourself, although that doesn't mean you leave the monsters in a bad place, but you could have done more to help them. But in the Genocide ending, you put in a lot of work and will likely end up going through a lot of frustration when trying to kill Undyne and Sans, and all you get for this is the loss of your own soul. In the end, while it is the easiest to help yourself, the most satisfying thing and best course of action is to help others. After everything, I have to say that Undertale is probably one of my favorite games that I've ever played. While I don't think the gameplay is the most outstanding thing that I've ever experienced, it's still pretty enjoyable and keeps me from getting bored while going through the story. The creative ways that it uses combat mechanics is also fun. Going between bullet hell, platformer, and rhythm blocker / dodger is all well handled and mixes up what you need to do in fun and interesting ways, with all of them being handled well. Along with this, the music within the game is some of my favorite from almost any game I've ever played, some personal favorites being the track simply titled Undertale, the boss music for Sans Megalovania, and Hopes and Dreams, which is the boss theme for Azrael. Each one conveys the feeling that the game is going for pretty well, and they're all also pretty good on their own. My favorite amongst these is probably Undertale, and I often listen to it while working on projects such as these videos. The characters that appear in the game are all also pretty well done, each one having their own sense of humor that I myself enjoyed, and while I can understand some people not liking them, for the most part I found them to be rather funny. Other little touches also make them pretty enjoyable, the best example being Sans and his propensity for puns. Combine that with his text scroll noise, and that just makes most of the conversations with him pretty enjoyable. Overall, Undertale is an amazing and charming game. The themes of friendship, lovable characters, interesting world, and amazing music all come together to make it an experience that I believe will be remembered as a classic. If you haven't yet taken the time to play Undertale, I would recommend it. The game takes about 6 hours of playthrough to get to the good pacifist ending and costs about $10 on Steam. And as always, thank you for watching.